Saa ingine unaangalia, unashika kichwa, unasema gaiwi ito Jehova.
When he sees things, he feels like crying.
Kiongozi wa maana anashika steering wheel, anaangalia mbele. Sio kila saa kuangalia rear view ati ametoka wapi. Unaangalia mbele.
It is true.
Ukiwa mtu wa kuendesha ukiangalia rear view mirror, wewe ni mtu wa kupeleka gari katika
They are now wondering, it was actually true that housing was possible and we wasted time on reggae. They feel like crying.
I want to encourage you to continue looking at the rear mirror, because the inventor of the motor vehicle was not mad by putting the rear mirror. There are also people who would want to derail your vehicle. There are those who like to puncture the rear wheels. There are those who like to remove goods from your pickup behind. You must continuously look at the rear mirror and the side mirrors, so that anybody who may want to derail your vehicle, you are ahead.
Hakuna pahali mnaenda, hakuna pahali mnapeleka inchi. Inchi inataka viongozi ambao wako na maono ya mbele, kwa sababu hiyo ndio itakuwa ya manufaa kutatua shida.
Any serious leader will listen to what I am saying and do something about it. Because the only thing I find when I come to counties, watu wananiambia, oh, kuna mwanasiasa fulani alianguka kura, tafutia kazi. Kuna mwingine hapo alianguka kura, tafutia kazi. Na hawa wengine wote amusemi. Ati amujaambiwa? Mnataka kuambiwa na nani? Kwani amusomi gazeti? Na saa ile mimi naongea, mnafikiri mimi naongea hewa?
Sometimes even we have cabinet committees, we are not able to prosecute our agenda because ministers are in out of parliament.
We cannot underestimate the power of educated and healthy girls and boys in our countries. We have to be intentional about empowering and building confidence in them to know that they have the skills and what it takes to work towards economic empowerment.
I know that there is an excellent relationship on the highest level between His Majesty the King and the President, but we need to translate this vision into a practical step to be taken further.
Wengi mmeanza kuwa na wasiwasi ya kwamba sasa Baba Raila Amolo Odinga akienda huko Ethiopia itakuwa namna gani?
We have a whole year as a party to organize ourselves, which is enough time to organize ourselves and to stabilize.
Naanza kuwa na wasiwasi ya kwamba Azimio huende kasambaratika. Leo nikiwa hapa nyumbani Kakamega, nataka niambie watu wa Western mliosimama na Baba ya kwamba Azimio iko imara.
People who have developed their career by hanging and shouting the name of Raila Odinga as the only record of achievement in their political lives, saying in the defense of Baba, calling themselves Baba's defenders and so forth and so on, are going to have their career come to a tragic end.
We have no shortage of leaders in Azimio. Leaders are there. Some will come. Azimio is still intact. So as soon as Raila decides, whichever decision he makes, I don't want to talk on his behalf, then we will agree who takes over Azimio.
People are going to assess leaders based on the development abilities, based on development record, and it will also include, or rather depend on, what will be Raila Amolo Odinga's role in Kenyan politics in 2027.
Right, yes, to give you a feel and a flavor of what is happening on the soapbox, just to also get to see the indications that is there as far as the biggest ticket issue is, that is the AU top job. But before we go there, we are still continuing and looking at the retreat back in Naivasha, how it was yesterday. We took just a break. And now we want to circle back with Danson Mugatana. I interrupted you just on your track of thoughts when you're talking about that particular meeting. And I was asking a critical question.
Correct.
Yes, we begin there. That we amended the standing orders so that we have the cabinet secretary to appear before Parliament. And now we have a section, or the whole cabinet secretary appearing with a section of Parliament, which is Kenya Kwanza largely leaning. Is that in order?
I think it is absolutely in order. First of all, we are not inventing the wheel. We have done it before. I've been around leadership, so I know this is something that happens. And it is, of course, necessary because when you are running governments, we meet with the president as a parliamentary group, but the president doesn't work alone. The president works with a team. And that team needs to hear what we tell the president in our parliamentary group meetings. So when they hear firsthand, they get a feel of the problems that are affecting us as representatives of the people. So it's a very good thing. In fact, we should continue with it. And we have agreed that we will try to organize at least 2 times so that we have feedback mechanisms, you know, people are suffering.
Yeah,
and it is within the law because, you know, government operates at 2 levels. There's the one that you see, the official one, and there's the one that you organize. Because before a cabinet secretary comes to answer a question, obviously they have done some work behind there. So before we as a team of Kenya Kwanza, and I don't know why you're having difficulty accepting this, the president doesn't work alone. He works with a team. And that team, we also don't work alone. We work with that team to make sure that we deliver on the manifesto.
Indeed, I agree.
There's no problem with that.
The president meets the cabinet.
Yes.
As a cabinet meeting where they have approvals on some of the bills as well.
Yes.
You are not invited as parliamentarians for that meeting, do you?
No, we don't go to cabinet.
Then how is it then you are actually taking a retreat and you have this same cabinet secretary that they appear with the executive and you're coming for these particular meetings? So you say that also the opposition does not get stopped on having a meeting with the cabinet secretary. Will it be in order for you to hear tomorrow that we've had Azimio meeting with the cabinet?
How will
that look?
We welcome them to come to State House anytime if they want, but they wouldn't come because you know how politics operates. No, I'm just trying to tell you, Dibal, in real politics, you must have your team assembled so that you also get feedback. Like, for example, let me finish this point. Let me finish this point. No, those are also structures. Let me finish this point. You come into that meeting, and when members of parliament stand up and say, look, we are having a problem. Yes, you are telling us we need to do labor migration to deal with this issue of unemployment for our youth, but where are the passports? You know, that is proper feedback. And then what does the minister stand to say? He says, I'm generating 20 billion in this department. Let me finish the ball, please. I'm generating 20 billion in this department. I'm not getting back any money for appropriations in aid. So we have agreed that going forward, we are requesting to retain at least 5 billion so that we can pay the pending bills, we can repair our machines, and we deliver even more because the passport demand has shot up from 500,000 a year to 3 million a year because of this labor migration. So when you sit down and you are working with your team, remember our cabinet is part of our team, and you are giving them feedback, and they are giving you their issues and their challenges, and we are solving them. That is a way the government works. Remember, we are in government, and there is the opposition.
All right.
So this is how it is structured, and there is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't continue having that feedback mechanism so that we can deliver on the
floor of the House. You'll still ask them the same question you've been asking for the retreat.
No, obviously, there are so many questions. We never even finished.
Because these are supposed to be documented.
No, we never finished.
These are supposed to be on the handset so that we...
No, not necessarily. Any discussions I have with you, it doesn't have to be in public. I can have a discussion with you outside. So that is exactly the same thing. The ministers and ourselves, the president, we are having outside the handset, but solving the same problem, working for the same public that elected us.
Yusuf, I think I have a problem with that setting. I don't know. It seems like we can just assemble, cabinet secretary in a corner, in a kiosk somewhere, have a discussion on pertinent issues. There are no documentations, no record. How do we follow through? I mean, don't you find it to be a bit awkward that you and the executive and the cabinet are meeting one side of the committee? If it's the chair, the executive meeting as, the leader of UDA or Kenya Kwanza, that is appropriate, and meeting with the parliamentary groups. But now, throwing in the mix also the cabinet secretary for that particular meeting, I don't know what is the legal framework for that, because we actually amended the standing orders so that they might be appearing before the House to answer these questions that you're asking them on a retreat.
Well, this gathering was a political gathering. There's really nothing outrageous or strange about the president. After all, is the leader of that political party. And these are members of his cabinet and members of his political formations. So I think we should not be exaggerating.
The cabinet secretaries are not politicians.
No, the cabinet secretaries are members of his cabinet and his government. And they were elected on the manifesto of the Kenya Kwanza party or coalition. So there is really...
Are they supposed to be apolitical?
No, they can be apolitical in the sense of taking sides, but there's absolutely nothing wrong for the same cabinet of the Kenya Kwanza coalition sitting together with members of their parliamentary formations. I don't see any contradiction in that. PGs do happen, political parties. The whole process, the whole Kenyan process is a political process. So to say that the president cannot meet his cabinet and members of his political association, the parliamentary group, is not absurd. It's just a normal thing. The same thing recently, there was an outcry also on the meeting between the judiciary and the executive. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive meeting. They are part of the same government. They're not as if they are contradictory or adversary parts of the same system. There's absolutely nothing wrong in having meetings and engaging in meetings, as long as, of course, the purpose of those meetings are for the common good and discuss issues that are legal under our laws and our constitution.
All right, Okongo Mogini, let's hear from you.
I don't know what you want to hear from me, because ideally, as my colleague Otienda Molo said, ideally those meetings can be good if it's an opportunity for members of parliament to raise issues of concern to the people on bills that are pending before parliament. But they serve no purpose, and they help in really killing the independence of parliament when they end up being lectures, occasions for president to scold members of parliament and direct them on how to vote. Most likely, the end results would be to whip members to fast-track bills that are of interest to the executive, kind of threaten members of parliament not to raise any objection. And you overtly had the leader of majority, National Assembly, seeking the intervention of the president to whip the members to vote in a certain way. So that kills the independence of parliament. But, you know, such a forum, in a good democracy, such a forum gives an opportunity to the members of parliament as an independent arm to raise issues of concern to the executive on certain bills that are pending before the House. But when they turn out to be an occasion for you to get lectures, then it actually becomes a counterproductive.
We were not lectured. We were not lectured.
No.
I don't want to intervene, but that's not correct.
You know,
let him finish.
You know,
not lectured.
Dibal, these are things you see. You can see even the body language. You had the murmurs from members of parliament when the president was talking. So when it happens in such an atmosphere, really, it's not useful to that entity called parliament. But we have always argued that the proper way to do those PGs is call your members. If this time is UDA or Kenya Kwanza, whatever it is, put the bills on the table, let members raise issues of concern, then meet the president to negotiate and find a middle ground. Because, Dibala, I'll tell you, there are many issues around the housing bill, even the unconstitutionality of the housing bill. So I expected the leadership to first meet the members of parliament, raise the issues that are in contention, okay, in a very free atmosphere. By the time you meet the president, you go and negotiate and come out with something. But going to State House and you just get lectures and then you say you had a successful PG. For me, it doesn't enhance the stature of Parliament. In fact, it reduces the stature of Parliament. And you have seen now my colleagues here are struggling, trying to draw a boundary between the independence of that institution called Parliament and the executive. How do you draw the boundary between Parliament and the executive? And that becomes the debate. Yeah.
Right. Otiende.
Well, first, there's a big problem with the conception in terms of the workings and structure of government between my friends, Honorable Yusuf and Honorable Mungatana. You hear Honorable Mungatana use the words, we in government. Okay. He says the opposition in parliament, both of which are conceptually wrong.
We are not in government.
No.
It's not our government.
Yes.
It is your government.
Then Honorable Yusuf says, the president can whip his cabinet. His cabinet. The cabinet is the cabinet of the republic. They are not William Ruto's private cabinet. That the cabinet member was of his party. Even if anyone held a clear political position or opinion, under Article 75 and 77, it is expected that once they are in that office, the political undertones must be thoroughly diminished. Those highly partisan positions, in fact, is supposed to attract, disciplinary measures. But you have a situation where instead of following the spirit and wording of the Constitution, you are having cabinet who are supposed to serve only one faction of the society. When you say his cabinet instead of the cabinet of the republic, that is the distinction. Now, it is not right to deny the obvious. It is true that even members of parliament are becoming tired of being lectured. And we saw and we had the reaction by those who are in that PG meeting during some, especially, for example, when Kimani Ichung'wah was referring to the CDF issue, there was a clear pushback. It's not a figment of the imagination of the media. Even if you look at page 5 of the Standard, it gives the analysis. The deputy president was talking about, members of legislators who are fighting government and all that, and there was a clear pushback. The president himself was answered back by those who are there when he was saying that he's disappointed, only 500 nurses applied, and he was told that they didn't know. Yeah. What was his reaction? But how come you don't know? I've been talking about it everywhere else. You can see that kind of thing.
Yes.
And it is also obvious that we are in a situation where the country as a whole, if you look at, I think the analysis of the Standard, the country as a whole is becoming really tired of the promises and the empty rhetoric, so that, as Honorable Mugani was saying, the cheers have quickly turned to jeers. And these jeers are not just now in public gatherings, they are even in private gatherings in Naivasha. If you look at page 23, they are explaining in the case of Central Kenya why that is turning out to be so. But it's the position everywhere. My brother, Honorable Mungatana, is struggling on this issue of affordable housing. Let's talk about it just briefly.
But before we even go to the affordable housing, I just wanted to get clarification on the amendment of a standing order for the cabinet secretary to appear.
I made that point, so yes. I don't need to make it any further than it is. You see, first,
so it's not
I was myself opposed, and I remain opposed to the idea of cabinet secretaries coming to parliament. My opposition was based first in terms of the principles of the Constitution. We had purposefully left the executive outside of parliament. And my argument has always been to try and bring the cabinet secretary allegedly to respond to questions in the House is a backdoor way of bringing the executive back to parliament. Now, somebody then asked, but how come the CS in charge of Treasury is allowed to do that? The answer is simple. He is allowed to do that by the Constitution itself for a very good reason, for the limited purpose of engaging in terms of the budget. And he comes not as a member of parliament, he comes as a person coming to answer to Parliament on certain critical questions, just the same way the President is allowed to come and address Parliament and, on occasions specified by the Constitution. But beyond that, I was also opposed to it, which is what has come to pass. It is merely a show of enabling the Kenya Kwanza regime, yes, to instigate questions which then the CSS, parade some sort of answers and then come and present. It's a stage-managed melodrama. It is nothing real. They don't even come to answer any real question. That is the truth. Honorable Sophia will tell you. That is the truth. Look, how do you ask me a question as a cabinet secretary, then the cabinet secretary crafts the answers, then if, for example, it's a question regarding Ministry of Internal Affairs, then you give the chair of the committee to read it on behalf of, what will the chair know that I don't know? And we sit with him in Bunge. It is not effective. It is useless. But now it is made worse by this situation. Indeed, the fact that you can have one section of Parliament going to allegedly question the cabinet members in a retreat tells you that whole thing is not working, because if it was working, what are they going to question? They don't need even to question the president, to question the cabinet secretaries, when we have the power to question them directly. It's a demonstration that it does not work. So it serves no other purpose other than to demonstrate the very clear effort by this regime to control both Parliament and the judiciary and all other arms of state and organs of state. They don't even need to do that, because I'm the first to concede they are in control of Parliament anyway, So they don't even need to call our colleagues to Naivasha to whip them any further than they are whipped. I think the only reason they're called is that the murmurs within that section are growing. So there's need to whip them back because people are starting to resist. Even on this question of affordable housing, you saw the reaction of the president when he was basically threatening them that he's not pulling back on the question of housing, that they must pass the legislation, they must do it quickly because it's a promise that they made. The irony is this. Lately, the question of affordable housing, because they can't quite answer the questions around it, it has moved from being a matter of housing to a matter of employment. Isn't that just laughable? This is how they say it. Mungatana here, my brother, says affordable housing has created 180,000 jobs. Something extracted from the air. Well, the president then says in the retreat, it has created 130,000 jobs. I think those figures are plucked from the air, but that's not what's important. What's important is this. The idea of adequate housing is an idea that emanates from Article 43. That is also where they talk of food, the right to food, the right to clean water, and a host of other things, okay, including education. If you are trying to satisfy a right under Article 43, you cannot satisfy it under compulsion. You cannot compel Kenyans that they must pay a certain levy in order for you to satisfy that right. Then it's not a right. It is slavery and servitude. You satisfy that right by making sure you can get monies that do not add pain to Kenyans. And the argument why it's laughable is they say we must do this affordable housing because we are creating jobs for the youth. Okay? So, two questions. One, this youth for whom you are creating a job is being made to pay the levy in order for the youth to get a job to do. Isn't that just laughable? And that youth will then not even be eligible to stay in that house because of the kind of monies that is attached to purchasing or renting that house. So how are you affording housing for that youth or the rest of Kenyans? Two, if that argument was to be logical, then we would say now, not all Kenyans have sufficient water. We need water for every Kenyan. For that, we just need to create jobs for youth. How do you create jobs? You make sure every youth is able to go and draw water from some source and bring to every household. And for that, they will be paid. And the money that they will be paid, again, must be levied upon all Kenyans. And you can make the same argument for food, that there are Kenyans who are starving. So let's make food for them. Where do you get the money? Impose a levy on Kenyans. it is a nonsensical argument. You cannot impose a levy on Kenyans in order allegedly to satisfy a right. But more importantly, at the end of the day, you see, and I think it's captured in that page 23, if I have a right to something, then I have a right not to have it. It is a right under Article 43, an aspirational right. But virtually all Kenyans have rejected it. So for whose benefit are you forcing this? If the very people who have that right are saying, if it's at the pain of this levy, then let that right stay. Why are you insisting? What is this benefit in this affordable housing that goes beyond the people who are supposed to benefit? Is it possible that there are aspects of this affordable housing that are benefiting some people individually, and therefore it must pass, come rain, come shine? That is what most Kenyans are asking.
Let me just. Why you shoehorned to actually pass this legislation? Because it appears also when you're just looking for these dailies.
Let me just get back on that. You see, Mheshimiwa here is arguing that it is bad to have an exchange. You know, it is a terrible thing, in fact, even to question members of the cabinet. It shouldn't happen. We should be totally separate. I think it doesn't make any sense to me. If I meet, for example, the Minister for Treasury here, not even in the retreat, but I've met him on the streets, and I'm asking him, why haven't you released the CDF money? What am I doing? I'm doing my work as a representative of the people. So do I have to wait for a question to be put in the order paper and then argue? You know, when he argues sometimes, and I have a lot of respect from my colleague here, but sometimes I wonder why we should be so, clogged up in opposition and opposing everything for the sake of opposing. How can you say the questions in the House are a melodrama? We engage these people seriously, and they sweat in that cabinet, and in that cabinet when they are before the House, and they give us proper answers which inform our constituents. And I have never seen any person coming to answer questions, a chairman of a committee answering questions. What we have done is to create an opportunity for more accountability by the cabinet. And this is something good. We have passed it. I don't want to go into those arguments. And as for the question of people reacting in that meeting, I will tell you there were two occasions. And the first one, which is clear, is when they were talking about the National Employment Authority. Yeah, some people didn't know where it is located. Some people didn't know the opportunities which were there. And the president also told them that, because the MPs were saying this should have been put in our WhatsApp group or something, so that we have quick access. So he was making the point. And the problem with the snippets of the TV is that they don't explain everything. But he was making the point that as an elected leader, it is your business to know you have a problem of employment. Go get the set of skills that are required in the market. When you are paying for training for CDF, encourage people to go to a certain TVET that will produce this set of skills that are required. You have a responsibility as an elected leader to do that for your people. Don't tell them to go and read philosophy, get a degree in whatever. That does not bring you to the... In fact, he said most of these labor migration bilateral agreements, they don't require degrees. When you have a diploma, you have a proper training, you are able to do the job. You are the one who is required. So he was explaining. And this analysis that says the president's visit outside to other parts of the country, and it has turned from cheers to jeers. I'll tell you again, a lot of these headlines are supposed to be just for selling. They will not tell you the facts that in Kiambu, for example, there's a big war between the local wars between the members of parliament and the governor, the senator and the governor. So when there are issues in the local environment, the local political environment, and the president happens to be there, it doesn't transmit the fact that the president is the one being cheered or jeered. There's a problem. Of course, local politics are always like that. So let us distinguish that issue. And then on the question of affordable housing, I want to again make this argument that we have sat here many times to say Singapore developed, it did what, in 1970s we were at the same level, and then they are now in the first world. We are here where we are. They made hard decisions. I have said here many times and in other fora that we are in government not for a popularity contest. We have to make hard decisions for us to move to the next level. And I'm telling Kenyans, there's no way you're going to be a successful matatu businessman if you're not willing to put in the deposit. You cannot invest in a butchery if you're not willing to put in the deposit. You cannot start any business without suffering first. And we are at that stage. When we are doing this affordable housing, it's going to be painful. And I'm not saying it is fun to have your salary cut off, you know, to have that investment, to have that money put there for the purposes of developing this. But that's what Singapore did. That's what other economies which have done very well, they have taken the step to actually do what is right for the people. You know, we can go for cheers, like they were proposing we do, that we keep on paying consumption. You know, we keep on underwriting the checks that were coming for fuel and what and not at that time. You know, we have as a government to take responsibility. And I'll tell you that the sacrifice we are making here today in Kenya, if that affordable housing bill goes through, if Parliament approves it, because initially the issue was you can't bring it within the finance bill. It is wrong. So, and the courts were, and in fact they were right because the courts agreed with them. Now, we have gone through the process. The public participation has been done. Let us have the arguments. If there's need to amend that housing bill, let us amend it. If there's need to pass it the way it is, let us pass it. But I know that when they came to Tana River County, I was present in that meeting. And the chairman, Ngeno, when he was leading that meeting, we were there, the governor, the MPs, and all the people who came to. People raised issues, very many issues, but in the end, we agreed that we need affordable housing to be done in Tana River County. So it is not right to say that everybody does not support, because it's not just true, because I participated in those meetings and I saw people raising issues that needed attention, and we said when we go back to Parliament, when this report is done there, we shall debate those issues, improve on what is there, and then have this law. We don't have an option as Kenyans. If we want to move to the next level, if you want to be rich, you have to invest. And this is part of the investment that we must make for this country to move forward. I understand the opposition, but we have a Parliament. They can make those arguments. But let us carry forward. Let us agree the country needs to go to the next level of development.
We need to turn the crack now to other issues as well. I think we've given it a considerable stock in light of what is ongoing, and thank you for the clarifications. Yes.
You know, at times you can mislead the country in the issue. You know, when you talk about Singapore, we need to understand how that scheme of housing was done in Singapore. First, the legal regime in Singapore was, or is even today, very comprehensive. That scheme was designed for a cadre of citizens of that country that earn between 7,000 Singaporean dollars to 14,000 Singaporean dollars. Okay? And the design was very clear that these houses were being done through a business model, not through forcing people to contribute and then they don't benefit. okay? And the intention was that you have a population that earns an income, then can buy those houses. Now, here is a situation in Dibal where the new proposed law, I don't know about Tana River, maybe fishermen are happy to be taxed, yet they will never benefit, they will never afford those houses. You have people like farmers in Kisii, where this new proposed law is saying you will tax the tea farmer, but you're putting a price of 3.1 million that they will never afford. The $7,000 in Singapore, the population of 5.7 million Singaporeans can afford to purchase those houses. So there is a direct benefit. But here is a situation, Dibal, where you want to cheat Kenyans, the 52 million plus Kenyans, that you are building houses costing 3.1 million that will benefit people from my county of Nyamira. The population I have in Nyamira will never afford to purchase those houses. Maybe the income for people in Tana River can afford they can afford to buy them at 3.1 million. So the thing is, what we are telling this government is, even look at the proposed law. You want to tax Kenyans, not through the finance bill, but through a proposed housing act. So how do you want us to look at our taxation? That you want to tax us through the normal way of finance bill, then midway you also introduce another taxation through another housing bill? That cannot be right. And those are the issues we are raising in the bar, that we must be honest to Kenyans. This idea was proposed by UDA as an attempt to have houses for the low cadre Kenyans, not for the upper middle class, for the low cadre Kenyans. But what we now have on the table is a business initiative by the UDA administration and building houses that the poor, and I'm speaking here as a person who goes to church, the poor in this country, the mamamboga, the boda will never afford the purchase of those houses. That scheme will never benefit the poor. So you cannot tell us that you are doing what Singapore did. No, you cannot compare what Singapore did with what Kenya is doing. Singapore built houses that the market could purchase. The local market, not out, the local population. Here you are building houses where only about 5% of the population can afford. That's wrong.
Right. Let's hear from Yusuf. So this particular report is coming to be debated in Parliament already. The Ghana report, have you debated it? The one that they were seeking the public participation sentiments for the 19 counties. Is it
affordable housing?
The affordable housing. Yeah.
They visited 20. Out of 47, they only did 20 counties.
20 counties?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was 19 or 20? It was actually, Has it come to the floor of the House yet, or?
Well, the housing bill is, the amendment bill on the levy is coming to the House, and it will be debated and discussed in the House by parliamentarians. So I don't know what the hula bulla or the concern is here, because we will discuss it in Parliament. First of all, let's take a look at this, the story of the housing debate in our country. It was part of both the political formations.
Yes.
It was sold to the public.
Correct.
One of the formations, the Kenya Kwanza coalition, became the government of the day. They were elected to office.
Correct.
And they're implementing a political process that has the overwhelming support of the Kenyan population.
Correct.
Housing is a critical, important component in any society. And it's just one part of our development trajectory. For me, speaking from an urban perspective, from a neighborhood with a very large informal settlement, housing has always been in my program. When I was first elected, if you look at my manifesto as a member of parliament, the development of decent, affordable housing, social housing, is one of one of my campaign platforms. So it doesn't matter whether I was in Azimio or in Kenya Kwanza. I support it because it is the right thing to do, and it is good for our country. Now to have this thing politicized to the point where our brothers here are saying that it's illegal, it's unconstitutional, it's wrong, misses the point, in fact, that housing for an urban population is an essential thing. It's a right that you cannot avoid. And it is wrong for many numbers of people in capital cities and urban centers like Nairobi to be living in the conditions, in the inhumane, indecent and squalid conditions in which they live. So I think I see from my perspective and from my constituency and the population of Nairobi that the housing project is good. There is a social component in all these programs. For example, there are 2 or 3 housing projects in my constituency. There is a social component where there are affordable houses, and local people from Kikomba and other neighborhoods have applied and are on the queue to be able to pay for those houses. So I think we should not overly politicize this issue. It is something that we need, and I hope that this particular bill is passed because it's good for our country. It's good for Nairobi. And if we don't start on a major housing development at this stage in our development, we're going to miss out. Every day you don't build a house, the cost of living is going up, the cost of construction material is going up. We're going to miss the boat. It's the same way with the mass transport system. Nairobi is one of the only cities that does not have public transport system. The longer we wait to do that, the longer it will become impossible for us to afford a decent public transport system. So I think in terms of priority, I support the priority of the president in developing this housing project because it's long overdue and it's good for us. It will create, of course, jobs have been mentioned, but what's wrong if a project creates jobs? Is it a crime? Is it bad for our country? If you can provide housing, even for the middle class, our middle class cannot afford any housing at the moment because of the cost of housing. When I came back to Kenya, I was a highly paid official with the United Nations. My wife also was a very highly paid official in the UN. We could not afford a mortgage. When we looked at looking for a mortgage, it was beyond even the means of the two of us who are well earning, leave alone an ordinary Kenyan. So let's create a housing market. Let those who can afford to buy it. Let's subsidize parts of it for ordinary people in my neighborhood to be able to afford a house. And let's support the housing project because it's good for Kenya. You know, you have to pay levies in any society. The most advanced countries in the world are countries that impose the taxation on their population. Countries like Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden have developed because they use their taxes to create public health opportunities, social housing, and many of those countries are able to guarantee a decent living and a decent accommodation for their population because you tax those who can afford to be taxed in that particular population. It's the only way we can develop our country. We cannot depend on being given free housing, free health education, free water, through donations and through begging much.
But we see also the requisite benefits of those taxations. Because if you're taxing and we're not seeing the exceedingly beneficial effects of those tax, we're bound to be asked, what are some of the tangible things you've done with our taxes? We can choose those.
But that's a chicken and egg situation.
We can choose those countries.
Let me answer you
say
yes. But whose responsibility
the schools are efficient.
Whose responsibility
the public health sector is efficient.
Whose responsibility is that? It's the legislators should keep the government on its toes to make sure that in fact the money that the public is paying is used for the right purpose. It's not used, abused, or pilfered by the ruling political elite.
So how do we say it? When you look at the front page of the People Daily, that we have the government spending almost 3.3 billion shillings on luxury, on opulence. You have the budget chief indicting State House for use of billions of shillings. You have 700 billion shillings construction of modern presidential dais at State House Gardens. You had 400 million state purchase of motor vehicles. 16.3 million shillings purchase of East African Community Cabinet Secretary that is Penina Malonza's official car. We have 1.6 billion shillings to cater for the facility of Kenya International, Kenyatta International Conference Center. I think they misspelled, if you look at that. I mean, how do we're talking about taxes here, but also the expenditure bit of it is wanted. Right.
Can I say something on that? I don't know.
I wanted to finish with this, the question you asked, Honorable Yusuf,
yes,
about the bill.
Yes.
And to clarify that actually, it is slated to come up this afternoon in the National Assembly.
Yes, yes.
Alongside, other reports. And Honorable Yusuf starts by saying he doesn't understand what the hullabaloo is about because it will be debated in Parliament. That's the first problem. Usually, this is what happens, and I've said it in this show before. They were called to Naivasha to be whipped on that bill, and the idea is to fast-track it. And if they do what they always do, there will be no debate. It will be introduced, 1 or 2 persons maximum will speak, then somebody will say, Standing Order 95, the mood of the House is that we vote. And then they will be asked, robotically, that is that the mood? And then they'll answer yes. And therefore, could as many as of that opinion, and it will be answered in aye. What debate is that? There is no debate. Honorable Yusuf, who I've told you has become a deep sympathizer of this regime, can say these things here. But because he's also not, he's a Johnny come lately. So there's not only so much he can say the other side. He can't speak too loudly. Some of the more reasonable things he's saying here, he cannot afford to say there. First, because he will not have the space. Secondly, because no one will listen to him anyway. Where William Samoei Ruto wants a bill passed as he has instructed his troops, it will be passed with minimal debate. The most Kenyans will get at the debates we are having here. Honorable Mungatana, on his part, who's speaking, might not even get to see that bill because usually they curtail most of them in the National Assembly anyway. So then as a group, they lament, but they only lament quietly, when they're in the lounge, not loudly, because he might just be heard and he'll be told you are one of those who's opposing. These guys are also in a very difficult position. So they have our sympathy. Number one.
I want to have a comeback on that. I want to have a comeback on that.
Now, Honorable Yusuf says that, there's overwhelming support of this idea of affordable houses. I don't know which country lives in. I honestly don't know, and I don't know if his constituents are listening to him because then I sympathize with them. The overwhelming rejection of the idea, forget about the text of affordable housing, is for everyone to see. To say that, even the Azimio had that idea is not to say anything. Azimio had that idea but did not have the idea of immorally taxing Kenyans to give them housing. What this regime is doing is immoral. There is no country, and you've mentioned very many countries, there is no country where people are overtaxed like now. And secondly, you see the way Honorable Mugeni explained it, in most countries where they have this scheme, it is very clear. You must be conceptually clear. Are you talking of affordable ownership of a house or affordable rent of a house? There are many countries that come with the idea of affordable rent, especially for civil servants. And they'll tell you that for this kind of scheme, you can contribute this much, but then the rent will be so little, and if you occupy it for so long, then it gets to be yours. That's very clear. So it's voluntary. It is voluntary, okay? Or you do what has been done here in this country before with the Kibra schemes. You don't start overtaxing people immorally. You use the tax you have to strategically and systematically build affordable houses, which then you identify the people who are supposed to benefit, and they benefit from them without overtaxing them. The idea that you can come to Rarieda and you get the teacher is in Rarieda, in my village, who stays in his own house, where he took a loan. He's still paying that loan, and he walks to school. Then you are overtaxing him to the point that he cannot pay the loan with which he built that house, for a house which he does not need and will never own. And so he defaults, and it results in not having a house, not getting this house you're building. It's immoral. It's unacceptable. And then there are still many questions around it. One, who will buy these houses? You know what will happen? As my colleagues are saying, that those who can afford will buy. Who can afford in this country? It is only those in this regime who are making immoral monies, and they'll buy hundreds of units. Then they will now tell you that 120,000 Kenyans, no, it can't get to that. 10,000 Kenyans have bought this unit, have bought. And if you look at those who have bought, it will be those who have been making monies immorally in this regime, not the person who was intended. 2, these houses are being constructed on what is supposed to be public land, or it could be private land in some instances. There are serious legal questions. If you go, as they are doing, have some sort of understanding with the county government, and then you take some county government land and construct this unit, technically, the person who owns land owns everything that is put on that land legally.
Correct.
So you are using national government money, and you've gone, say, to Kiambu, and you are constructing houses which in effect will be owned not by national government, but by the Kiambu County government. Legally, what happens to that?
Can I have a
No,
comeback?
let me just hold your horses.
Okay.
We are still, slowly. Yes. Secondly, if it's on private land, it's even worse. Because if it's on private land, then the whole unit gets to be owned by the person in whose name that land is. Now, the regime of ownership, again, in terms of an urban area and rural areas are different. And in urban areas, you can have what we call sectional properties, okay? Where you can have title, say, of first floor or fifth floor, only of your small unit. But there's a very elaborate scheme for that. You know, you must settle in terms of who owns the land, who then purchases the lease, because it's not ultimate ownership for each unit, and how you relate. So there are very many complicated things that they're just trying to sweep under the carpet, because for them, having promised, it is a big deal. And now, because there are too many questions on the question of ownership, they are transferring it to employment. That's just laughable. Look, there's nothing wrong with wanting to construct houses, but there's everything wrong in immorally taxing people to construct. Construct at your level. At my own level, I do what's called Ondoa Nyasi. At my own level, I spend just about 100,000 for each unit, and I've done about 100. I don't ask any of those people for 1 shilling. This government is already taxing the Kenyans. They can do affordable housing and affordable initiatives, especially in urban areas, where you can actually identify the neediest persons within the slum areas, construct for them houses that are appropriate, that are small enough, and you give it to them, not taxing them. Because if you overtax, they will not even, most of them will not even afford. So this whole regime, it's not about giving Kenyans affordable houses. It is about being seen to have fulfilled some imaginary promise that was not carefully thought out, and which will only benefit the very people who are already rich, not the people who are poor.
You said you're concerned to the fact that if it really comes to the House, this particular bill will just sail through. There won't be any much debate.
Let me have a back.
You will.
Yeah.
In Singapore.
My time is.
Okay.
Can I take a short break?
Okay.
Yeah.
1 minute. In Singapore, the point.
We'll come with Singapore. We'll come with Singapore.
Honorable
We'll come with Singapore.
Okay.
Can we just take that break, then we'll circle back? We'll begin with
you have to have a
Mugatana, then
comeback.
we weigh in on Singapore as well. We'll take a short break.